Welcome back to another episode of Lulu's Perch. First and foremost, I need to say a big thank you to you, our viewers, because we've reached 1,000 subscribers. Yeah! In 1 year, we've grown our roots, we've turned from a seed to a sapling, and now it's time for us to level up and be repotted. Because I want to give you more of the fruits of my labor, and I'm doing that by starting the Lulu's Perch Pioneer Guild on Patreon. Now what that means is I've created a site where you can watch my episodes early, see bonus behind the scenes footage, you can vote on future content, and you can also ask questions for future Q&A episodes. I'll make an episode about it next, but it's a bit more comprehensive, but check it out in the description box below and become a Lulu's Perch Pioneer. So now, back by popular demand, this is Jeff Lawton's 2-hour presentation on food forests at Tom Kendall Celebrate Festival. Hey Jimmy, I'm working here, can't you see? If you haven't seen the edited 15-minute version, I'll leave the link in the description below with Tom Kendall's and also Jeff Lawton's YouTube links. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Okay. So I'm your guest speaker for the next 90 minutes and then an hour of question time over tea break. I'm Jeff Lawton. Tom did a course with me a while ago with Bill, and we're gonna talk about these things, food forests, which vary innumerably across the planet in their styles and variations of elements. Anybody here got a food forest? Anybody working on a food forest?
We'll be after
working
this.
on it. Really small one. Working on it.
Planning on it at the moment.
Yeah.
About to implement it.
About to implement. Right. Everybody from this area or anybody come from outside?
Lockyer Valley.
Lockyer Valley.
Yeah.
Mm.
Ipswich.
Scenic
More or
room.
less the same climate but a little bit further inland.
Yeah.
Mm.
Dry.
Drier.
Same
Drier
climate
and
there.
cooler.
Colder.
Yeah. Continental effect.
Yeah.
As you get away from the ocean, you go cooler in winter and hotter in summer,
Yeah.
and often a bit drier in a lot of continents. Most people are roughly this region.
Yeah.
So we'll stick to this region. Of course, we're in a. You've always got to look at climate whenever you're designing anything. It's one of the first things that changes your focus as a designer. It's one thing to be a designer. It's another thing to be an accurate designer and get it more focused into your particular region. And climate actually goes in front of landscape as a thing that makes a variation of what you do. So the climate's just north in the humid sense are the tropics, and just south from here in the humid sense are the Mediterranean, which are only just humid. The Mediterranean climates are just on the edge of arid or evaporation over rainfall. And our subtropical lines, this subtropical line, which is where we have the sun is never vertical, but it's tropical type climate. In other words, a winter dry and a summer wet type. All the big deserts of the world are on this line. Right? So this is the desert climate of the world if you go into a continent. So, the Sahara's on this same latitude, but north of the equator. Of course, the Great Australian Desert, the high dry lands of Brazil are on this same latitude. Just north of the equator, you have the great Asian deserts in India. So we think of it as humid, but it's only humid when you're near a coast. Right? So the same, when you go to Lockyer Valley, you just go that little bit distance from the ocean, you start to get the continental effect of the dry interior, as well as the cooler winter and hotter summer. And as you go closer to an ocean, you get a moderating effect of maritime influence. And that's where we are. But because of that, we get a bit of everything, a little bit of everything. So does the Mediterranean. The Mediterranean's an edge climate as well. It's the hottest of the temperate climates. So as you go further south, you get to the Mediterranean climates where you have a winter rain dominance and a summer dry, and you have the hottest and driest of the temperate climates. So you have the worst bushfire scenario in the world. So Southern California being number one and Southern Australia being number two, where you can have really wet winters and extremely dry summers and you get a massive fire load. but you don't have quite the same lushness because you have winter rain rather than summer rain in the next climate south of us. But it is an edge. So we talk a lot about edge in design. You have to talk a lot about edge in a food forest, both in space and time. So climate is really both. It's space and time, edge system. A nice way to think about Mediterranean climate that's different to here is there's in the Mediterranean and deserts, you have green trees in summer and brown trees in winter because they lose their leaves. And you have green herbs in winter and brown herbs in summer. So if you go to Melbourne, go to Tasmania, in summer, all the non-woody plants, all the grasses, all the herbaceous plants are brown all summer and green all winter. And the trees are green all summer with full leaves and then a lot of deciduous trees, and brown all winter because they've lost their leaves still because it's a temperate climate. That's the big difference between this edge. Right, so we can grow some subtropicals. In fact, I just saw a pomegranate down here a bit further down, which is classic Mediterranean and even arid Mediterranean. And we can grow figs carefully, not too easily, because we're a bit too wet. Right? So one way I like to talk about the Mediterranean difference to here is in summer it's it's brown down and green up. In winter it's green down and brown up. Yeah? I just try and simplify it into some sort of like non-scientific chat, right? But that's literally how it is in the Mediterranean. It's not like that here. Right? Sometimes we brown off a little bit in our dry spring. Our worst section of the year in subtropics is our dry spring. So we have a wet summer with a lot more rain than we do evaporation. We have a cool winter, and it can be quite cool. It can be quite cool some years, and shock all the tropicals, especially if you're at the bottom of the valley. Now you notice the old banana farmers were all at 100 meters to 200. They were in the thermal belt. They weren't below 100 meters, and they weren't above 200 much. Right? They're in this. That's subtropics. A lot of people don't realise you can get -9 here, centigrade, in the bottom of the valley. We had it. We've had -9 6 nights in a row. It's a 50-year event. It happens every 50 years. If you can find someone who's lived more than 50 years and they've been on the land, they'll remember that 50-year event. It'll be something special. You'll definitely remember it. Something you don't forget. Not many of us remember 100-year events because we don't live long enough to have any memory after 100 years anyway. Much. There are these cycles of events, 10-year, 15-year, 20-year, 50-year. Not many of us, especially today, have been on land very long to remember many cycles. So here, we have to be very careful in the subtropics, be very careful about our springtime. This is when we can cause most damage. Remembering that the deserts are all on this line. And if climate change becomes dramatic, and it's not really dramatic yet, but if it becomes really dramatic, we turn into a desert. We will be a coastal desert here. There's no question about that. It's going to go one way or other, it will go into a dry desert. And all tropicals will die. So you better get ready with a few desert species just in case. Right? Diversity being your security in permaculture. So we have a tropical summer with good rain, high temperatures, cloud cover, typical rainy season. And then we have a desert spring. Potentially it's quite dry and extreme temperatures. Our highest temperature is always going to be pre-midsummer. If you're looking for the hottest time of year in this region, it's going to be November. It's going to be just before we get to the longest days. Yeah? And it can be a bigger dry or a smaller dry. It can be a bigger tropical summer or a smaller tropical summer. We're in an edge climate, so they're not set in stone. They vary. And then we have a temperate climate winter. Now this is a weird one because you can really get this really wrong, right? It's a temperate climate type winter that's temperate climate in temperature range like a temperate climate summer. Our winter temperatures are like a summer in the temperate climate, but the coldest point is in the middle. The days are shortest in the middle. It starts in the tropics, it ends in a desert, and the frost is in the middle. That's not a temperate climate summer. A temperate climate summer starts in a frost and ends in a frost. Although we can grow cabbages, broccoli, and if you're right at the bottom of the valley, you might even grow some cauliflower. You definitely can't grow parsnips. And definitely can't grow Brussels sprouts that actually tighten up. And it's really hard to keep in onions because you don't get the chill long enough. You're lucky if you get the chill right when you harvest. 22 weeks of onion growth. Grow them in the heat, pick them in the cold. Pretty hard to do. If you're going to end up in July, you've got to start in February. That's pretty hard to grow seedling onions in February, you know. So, you know, you just got to think about your climate. It's not quite as simple as a few quick sentences. And that changes what we do in here, because this type of system is an ecological food production in that it's a perennial system, it's long term. It's a productive forest, and we facilitate it by design. So it all happens by design, and they're really, really, really easy to run once they're mature. But that doesn't help you at all when you're trying to make one, right? Yeah. Permanence is really easy once you've got it. Once the ball's rolling, it's easy to keep it rolling. You roll a tyre down a hill, once you can kick it along, it's easy to keep it rolling. Try getting it rolling and stopping it wobbling off the track. You know, that's the hard bit. It's the same with all the design. It's not, the permanence is really easy once you've got it going. It's just a simple bit of passing on the maintenance knowledge. But, you know, first comes design, second comes implementation, third comes establishment, and then fourth comes maintenance. And the maintenance bit's easy, as long as you've got the heritage. I mean, because it literally is heritage. The sustainable world of humanity will have 70% forest, and a large, most intense part of that will be food forest. It won't be the largest part of the forest, because the largest part of the forest will be farm forestry, interacting with grazing rangeland. So if you're looking at the future of humanity, with its 70% landscape and forest, you've got like urban agriculture right in town with super diverse, very fine gardens with super valuable medicinals and specific quality gardens. They're very special, and they take a little bit of extra attention because they're so small, and you've got loads and loads of time right in front of it, right in your face, everywhere you're interacting all the time. Then just outside of that, if you've got your production systems, your perimeter urban agriculture, what they call peri-urban, really close to the workers, got the waste from the city, got the microclimate of the city, got the runoff water of the city or town, let's not call it a city anymore. And then you've got your production forest, your very, very high production forest, interacting with that from the outside, like tentacles coming into the perimeter urban crop system. You know, small animals, medium-sized animals, and then outside of that, rangeland and forestry. And there the forests are quite big and very long-term, like we're talking 50-year minimum. You know, it's going to take 50 years to cut the silky oak gardening after you plant it. May as well leave it 50 because you're going to have plenty of them. You could cut them at 25 if you want, but you won't need to. You'll have plenty of them 50 years old, and you'll have them forever. They'll go forever. Then none of it will, if nobody comes and bombs it, cuts it down, naparms it, which is what the strategy of controlling people is, cut the forest down. It's a long-term thing. You cut people's forest down, change their diet, change their education, indoctrinate them into something else, and there's no heritage to tell you how to do it, put it back up. That's the situation we're in. That's where we are. I'm sorry to tell you. It's still going on today. You know, they're bombing Al Ghouta. They're talking about bombing Al Ghouta in Syria. If you've ever been to Al Ghouta, it's just the most amazing place you've ever seen in your life in the desert. It's the Barada River coming out of the Syrian highlands that come down and sinks into the desert plain called Al Ghouta. If you've heard it on the news, it was on the news just as we were driving it. We actually did some design work in Al Ghouta. It's just marvellous. It was. I don't know what it's like now. one of the classic desert scenarios of the world. There are only tiny little spots in deserts where you get those classics. But so to get this up is quite a trick, and there's numerous ways you can do it. But basically, you've got to convert the soil from what it is before, and it's probably not going to be a forest. You're not likely to go across the road into that older growth forest. I'm going to cut that down and put a food forest in. That really is a little bit unethical, right? Okay, it's not what permaculture people do. We try and behave, well, we try very hard to behave ethically. It's as theming. So we're on a bit of, I remember this place when Tom first moved in. I was actually doing a consultancy next door, and they brought me in here to meet Tom, who was stuck in this weird nightmare with the house falling off the stumps and a dam that was totally dry. We had to fight our way up there to have a look at the dam, and this was just, and I actually thought he'll never do it, so I was totally wrong. He's a lot tougher than I thought he was, right? And had a lot more heritage in farming than I realised. And I never thought I'd be stood in this, really, because it really was a hard bit of ground. This is hard soil. This is difficult, very difficult soil. It turns around beautifully if you've got the dogged persistence to get through the dip. Everybody goes through a dip, eh? You start something, you're all enthusiastic, it's all wonderful when you start it, and then you hit the trough. And it can be quite a long trough before you start climbing out, where you've got a really nice view and you realise you've got something special. But the dip's the bit where you need dogged persistence. And this has been, I would imagine, quite a journey. We've been interacting quite a bit, and I've seen it jump in fertility, and it's getting up the canopy in here. But to get it from the paddock, get it from the grass dominance, which is not natural in the subtropics. We didn't have many grassland areas. This would have been forest once, obviously. To get it back into a forest that is conveniently productive around the human settlement is quite a trick. And you've got to use species that will take control for you. You've got to facilitate something that grabs the landscape and starts to convert it in a way that you can feed the soil by convenience. So Tom just cut a bit of herbaceous material with his machete there. But like this thing could live for 800 years. Right? This jackfruit, he's got the potential to go for 800 years. A good jackfruit, they all originate in India. And it's the largest fruit in the world. You can eat the seed, you can boil the seed, you can eat it green as a vegetable, you can eat it fresh, ripe as a fruit, and it's an incredibly high quality timber that's about that yellow colour as well. It's furniture timber, window frame timber, door timber. It's very prized in Asia as a timber. A good jackfruit produces 500 kilos a year. An exceptional jackfruit produces 800 kilos a year of fruit. You know, give it 80 or 100 years to grow, and then another 700 to do that, and you're doing pretty well, you know. And you happen to have the heritage of the oldest jackfruit in Australia, right just a few kilometres from here at Borean Point. It's in a park in Borean Point. It's about 130 years old this year. It's massive. Anyone know that one? Borean Point in the park, just back from the beach. Borean Point Lake.
Go and get some seed later.
It's massive. The trunk goes from me to you. No, hardly anyone harvests it. There's thousands of fruit on it. It's almost dangerous to go underneath it. The ground is covered in rotten fruit and seed. Thailand ladies go out there with their kids and they take trampettes, you know, little exercise trampolines. And it's quite interesting what they do. It's typical sort of Asian ingenuity for harvesting big fruit trees. They line the trampette under the giant ripe jackfruit like that, and they send one of the young boys up who's like, you know, early teenager, to climb the tree and cut it, and then they come down and hit the trampette. All the kids have to get back, and then as it goes up and does the second bounce, they all rugby tackle it to the ground. It's a great thing to watch, you know. Probably work health, space and safety wouldn't allow it, but they don't really ask permission. And I've got many jackfruit in my farm from that one. I plant 50 jackfruit a year, 50 bunya pines a year, 50 mangoes a year and 50 pecans a year minimum on 66 acres, and I haven't run out of room yet. But I stun plant. It's a terminology from a mate of mine from North America, Mark Shepard. You might want to look up Mark Shepard's work. He's not in our climate, but he's got a great attitude. He's converted some really rough prairie country into incredible forest agriculture, actually. It's a bit more than just food forest, it's forest agriculture. So he's got lots and lots of food forest type systems between agricultural systems. And he came up with the terminology STUN, and it stands for strategic, total, utter neglect. Right? So he plants thousands of extra trees that he's in chestnut country, walnut country, hazelnut country. He plants thousands more than he needs, and the ones that don't perform, he just kills them. And he just keeps the performers. And that's what we've done forever. That's how we've got good animals. We just eat the ones that have got good attitude. Anybody keep cattle or sheep or any of that stuff? Yeah, you don't keep the bad ones. No, you knock them off and go in the kitchen. Yeah, you keep the good ones and you breed from the good ones. We did the same with all our trees. We did the same with everything. It was selection. It was mostly women who did the selection and men that did the killing. How it goes. Yeah, women tell us, we kill it. Right? We do things where we get hurt and cut and smashed up a bit, and women communicate and do all the clever stuff, really.
Yeah.
And the fine hand skills. Men don't have fine hand skills much. You have to try hard to copy women most of the time, do that. That's why we're not very good at some things. We're better at other things where we go and get hurt a bit, and like knock our hands up and stuff. And we don't communicate much. Men don't communicate much. They're very cruel. Men are very cruel to each other. We have to stand the criticism, sarcasm, and we grunt and tell hero stories. So to get this up, there's a few ways you can do it, but really you've got to design the way the forest falls. If you want to put it in the simplest terms, you've got to design a fast-track forest that falls quickly and facilitates the soil that grows the forest you want. You can't just plant fruit trees because it's really a lot of work. You see people plant fruit trees out in lawns and then mow around them forever. They really probably will mow around them forever. That's not a forest. That's like an ornamental garden. It's like a tree zoo. Now they're caged in grass. It's not what they live in. They don't live in grass. Grass is herbaceous. Not that herbaceous elements can't be part of a forest floor or part of a forest, but they're not the major part at all. Ecosystems are major in trees. Trees are the major elements of ecosystems, and they're the main capturing element of sunlight on the planet. And they facilitate the soil creation. And a forest grows on a fallen forest. A forest grows on wood. You've got to keep saying to yourself, a forest grows on a fallen forest, and the soil is an animal that's all mouth. And the fungi are the teeth that eat the wood. Now we think of fungi being soft, but they're real sharp. They're the tree-eating element, right? And to make that happen, you've got to get wood to touch the floor, stacking it up, or not cutting your branches up, leaving a branch stood up above the ground. I can't see anything, does it? Right? But you know, when this is touching the ground, if this was stood, if Tom hadn't cut this into a shorter length, it could have been propped up above the ground. Now it's firewood, now it's air dried. The fungi can't leap out of the soil and grab it. But at soil level, you just don't realise how quick it's gone. Like, who needs a chipper? You've got fungi. You've just got to design the way that happens as quickly as possible. Even at this size, well, this isn't one, we're not going to malt an olive necessarily. That's good wood too in the end. But this can be 2,000 years, by the way. This is one of the rare trees that live over 1,000 years. Might not do it here, because it might be growing a bit quicker, but in the desert, you can get a 3,000-year-old olive. They're very rare. 2,000. And a 1,000-year-old olive is reasonably common. But this one we can cut it here, looks like it has been cut here. We can cut it here and turn it into a pollard where it grows lots and lots of branches. And we can cut it every year and drop it at the soil. And because it's an ice cream bean, it's a legume. It also has a little pulp we can eat in the pod, but we can put it into function. Yeah, so yeah, there's little fungi. I mean, there's 50 million genus of fungi in the soil, and there's species in the genus, so there's more than 50 million, and we haven't named more than 1% of them yet. And the same with bacteria. There's 50 million genus of bacteria, and we haven't named more than 1% of them yet. We don't know anything about life in the soil at all, really. Yeah, so this is probably breakable, yeah. It's on its way down. Yeah, and it's just slow release fungal food, really. And the fungi can go some fungi can go 1.5 kilometres away from this zone and bring back phosphate. So the fungal tips on the hyphate have acid tips, and they can bring back phosphate, and their delivery surplus in transaction is phosphate to starch. The starch comes from photosynthesis on all plants. So the magic of photosynthesis is you can convert the sun's energy into solid material in base sugars of starches. So that's what these guys are exchanging with the tree. Right? So when they're connected to the living tree, because they can't photosynthesize. The flower's not, the fungi itself here is not photosynthesizing. Right? It's like the flower here with the spores. So facilitating that action is really important. And there's quite big chunks here. I can see stuff rotting down. It's quite light. It's all rotting down. So this thing is full of nitrogen. Being a legume tree, it's with all legumes that the highest nitrogen content, if you don't count the bacterial colony on the roots, because that's not the tree, that's an associate doing an interaction. And now it's a transaction between nitrogen, the bacteria is captured in the air in the soil, and starch. So that's another transaction. It's not the tree, so you can't count that bit, which has a lot of nitrogen. But if you just count the vegetation material, highest nitrogen content is in the seed, then the pod, then the leaf, then the fine twigs, which are often almost herbaceous on a legume tree, and then the wood itself. Now the wood can be 5% nitrogen. Now you could kill this tree, you could cut this tree off here and not allow it to grow leaves, and that will kill any tree. Don't let anyone tell you need poison to kill camphor laurel. You don't. You just don't let them grow leaves. Doesn't matter which tree it is. There are no trees you can't kill without poison. None. None whatsoever. Not one on earth. I kill camphor laurel in 12 months. No problem. Just don't let it grow leaves. And all its roots go as compost corridors in the soil. No problem at all. Right. Easy. You just got to be regular. You just have good habits. We're very good at bad habits. Not very good at good habits. That's all. Get out there. Young men are really handy with machetes because they love swinging them. So give the boy the machete, you go and cut it off all the time. But if you cut this off and don't let it grow leaves, it can be exuding nitrogen from the root zone for 5 more years. That's a lot of slow release in the beautiful contour pattern. A dendritic pattern going down into the soil, a reverse dendritic pattern. Like this is the mouth of the river, and the bottom of the roots are the headwaters going down in the ground, but it's not even flat like a river, it's 3-dimensional. You can't get a machine to do that. There's no machines will do that for you. So you can put these sort of things into function, and if you overplant them, what the hell, it doesn't really matter, you can kill it easy. And it's just more food for the soil. And you'll know when they're overcrowded, so you can stun plant these and get them to function and put lots and lots of material down on the ground. But if we just walked into the grass paddock and did that, it wouldn't be enough, because you've still got grass everywhere. You'd be cutting grass to get these to grow. So in the end, you're going to end up with a canopy of large fruit trees, understory of shade tolerant trees, maybe a layer of bushes, and coffee is the classic here. It's one of the classics understory of small bushes, very little herbaceous growth on the ground, a few climbers going up 1 or 2 legume trees, maybe 6 or 7 or maybe 8 maximum in a whole acre of large legume trees, and they could possibly be your host for climbers. And a lot of your smaller trees, like say citrus, won't grow in there, too shady. They'll have to be on the light edge around the outside. So you've got layers, you've got canopy, understory, bush layer, the edge, full light layer, the climbing layer. Maybe you'll have some shade tolerant ground covers and some shade tolerant herbaceous species, but there won't be many. But to start with, you're the other way round. Your little trees you're putting in this big, and everything's grass. Now everything's dominated by herbaceous layer, and you want to reverse that over time. So the quicker you can do that, the quicker you're into a food forest. And fruit trees, this thing's not getting any favours out in the grass. This thing's favoured by nitrogen. So that's a great start, but this is a long-term legume. And we've got to look at how do we get dominance as quickly as possible. So if we can go to short-term legumes that only last 6 months, they're called annuals, right? Annual or perennial. Perennial lasts more than a year. Well, let's go. Annual, 1 year, 1 season, annual. Biannual, 2 years. Perennial, more than 2 years. So if you can put a ground cover down like the green manure crop, like the farmers do, and you can cultivate the grass a minute. If you just mow it and cultivate it once, and then throw a ground cover down, it'll just turn all into ground cover. And that ground cover, when any of this sort of material falls into the ground cover, now it falls into the ground cover, it stays, it becomes a trap. So you immediately start to harvest woody material, little leaves, little twigs, any little insects that die, anything that falls in there, little insect wings, anything, insect manure, any of these fine things fall into a ground cover and start to change this soil into a fungal soil. Because the non-woody soils, the non-forest soils are bacterial dominant. So your vegetable garden is more bacterial than fungi. It still has fungi, but it's more bacteria. Your pasture grasses are not woody. Herbaceous means non-woody. Herbaceous plants are not woody plants. Bananas are herbs. There's no wood. They're the largest herbs. There's no wood in a banana. It's a big plant. Right? So we've got to lean towards, to grow hard woody trees, we've got to lean towards a fungal dominant soil. So as soon as we start to convert it with a ground cover, we move towards fungal. And then if we put a few like other easy to grow, like this is canna lily. What have we got here? This is,
That's a basil.
that's one of your strong basils. Got mugwort. This thing's really, it doesn't actually flower. Quite hard to kill it actually. You've got to dig it out a bit. But here Tom's keeping up with it by cutting it. But then you can move into fast growing, what I call short-term legumes. So you've got pigeon peas, cassias.
Go down there.
Go
There's a
there.
really good spot with it.
So we go from ground cover, short-term legume, medium-term legume, long-term legume. So you stacked it in time. Short-term legume, 6 months gone. Maybe a biannual, 2 years gone. Perennial, gone whenever you want to sacrifice it. All right? It's just here to be sacrificed. That's all it's here for. Right? Then short-term legume like pigeon pea, cassia, crotolarias, they all have nitrogen. They're all really good use of some other value. 4 to 5 years, 6, 7 years maximum. Gone. You've cut it. You've cut it. You've cut it. You've cut it. It's gone. Leucaena and some of the other larger medium-term legumes, they'll function longer, but 10 to 15 years, more or less gone. You've cut it, cut it, cut it, cut it, cut it, gone. These guys, they'll go as long as a fruit tree almost, but you've overstacked them. That's okay. Sooner or later, 90% of these are gone too. They don't have to be gone, but they're gone because they're actually physically creating the trees now. Because this thing's getting bigger all the time. This thing's going into function. Sooner or later, it might have to be this this ice cream bean or that ice cream bean. One's got to go. So you're now conducting the orchestra. You're designing the way the forest falls. You're time stacking the event to speed up succession to facilitate a forest that you want. It's still a forest. It's exactly the same as a forest. It functions exactly like a forest. In fact, I just showed you. That's exactly what's going on across the road. There's no difference. Nature has no sentimentality and no prejudice and no assumptions whatsoever. The birds that are in there will be in here. I bet you if you come in here at 11 o'clock, there'll be a wave of disturbance coming through here. Around about 11 o'clock, there'll be a wave of disturbance coming through here with many different species of birds cooperating together as a wave. There'll be canopy harvesters, understory harvesters, bark harvesters and ground harvesters, all different species of native birds coming through at once, just like they do through the forest. Tom's already been in here. There's an avocado in here. And this is pigeon pea. I'm probably going to do it different than how he does it. I'm going to get in trouble later. We all have our own styles. You know, there's a certain personality to this. Like I say, it all works. Your little lock keeps coming round. It locks every time. That's a super safety mechanism. What's going on?
Try those ones, yeah, so much, yeah, a little bit better for you.
Oh,
Gotta watch Tom's stuff.
I prefer the less maintained stuff, you know. Mine are probably rusty. Actually, mine are probably twisted by students, aren't they, Maria? Yeah. Probably good she did do that. Yeah, that's mugwort going down. Here's that basil, which is a nice smelly thing as well.
What was the basil for?
I don't know which basil this is.
Tulsi.
This is a Tulsi?
well, I've been calling it Tulsi, but
Holly.
I bought some and it's a bit shorter. It's just a bush basil or something like that.
There's a bit of comfrey in here. At the Permaculture Institute where I am in the Shannon, I'll do this Lucina. We've started now, I've done open food forests like rampant food forests for a long time. But I've just realised people still are not really interacting with them as much as I'd like. So I've started to put footpaths a little bit like Ernest Goetz. You know, Ernest Goetz of syntropic agriculture in Brazil. I was working in Brazil at the same time as he was starting up there, and I remember his early stuff. He put a lot of food. Anyone done syntropic agriculture?
Studied a bit, yeah.
Did you go on a course?
No.
No? Anybody do on a syntropic agriculture? This Brazilian system. But if you meet anybody that's done it, and they say, oh, I've been on a syntropic agriculture course, just ask them if they put in a lot of footpaths. So you've been putting a lot of footpaths in, have you? And you go, yeah, I have. Because he just puts footpaths he does a metre of food forest and then a footpath, a metre and a foot, it's all footpaths, half footpaths. And like myself, he uses chainsaw a lot because he puts a lot of big trees up. He puts a lot of logs down, which we all do when we create good forests. I've more or less done something similar just recently to make it more people friendly. And that is on the ridges, I've gone for about 3 metres between footpaths. Right? And I put logs on both sides of the footpath, and then I put them on contour. And of course, if you know landscape, when you start on a ridge at 3 metres apart, when you go round to the valley, they end up nearly touching. And then they go back out again at the ridge. So they're closing in at the valley and they're widening out on the ridge. A bit like a bow tie. That's the pattern it reminds me of, like a bow tie coming tighter at the knot and wider on the outside. That's how the pattern goes around the landscape. It gets wider on the ridges, and it's contour. So I'm a contour freak because I do everything on contour if I can. It's just easier walking on contour, harvesting on contour. I'm just choosing which branch I'm going to take off here. So I'm going to probably take that one. And I'm going to take all this off, and then ideally I'm going to want to take it about there. And I've got these in my vegetable garden because the weedies come in and they get really freaked out about Leucaena. One of the hardest working immigrants in the world, and they're going to worry about it. And people like BHP spend millions every year trying to stop it repairing the Northern Territory. I think non-native people can, oh, did I say people? Non-native elements can repair the landscape. Even people, non-native people can even repair landscape. If you go really fussy and tightly crop it, it won't shoot as much here, and I want it to shoot here. I want it to shoot like that. And then if anything comes here, when it's just green, I can just rub it off my hand. If it gets a little bit bigger, I've got to go along and clip it. I use this in my vegetable garden as the support species between beds. So I've got about 600 of these in half an acre. And yeah, in our chicken tractor on steroids. And these are our alley crop. And I have comfrey as a ground cover in the garden. But here it's simply in the food forest, and this is a medium-term legume. It'll be gone in 15 to 20 years' time. Be actually gone. Probably 10 to 15 probably gone, because this avocado is going to take over. So I haven't got safety boots on today. I'll be taking these out. It's getting a little bit late in the year. You're a bit more tropical than I am here. I'd pull up on the pruning come about mid-winter. I'd say after about June I'd definitely pull up here. I wouldn't be pruning this in July like this, because you're coming towards that dry spring. And now you've got Pigeon Peak coming up. And we've got long-term ground cover of Pinto there, which is not a racehorse. It's not real quick, but it's probably the most refined ground cover there is, because it's a long-term, it's a perennial ground cover legume, and it's really prostrate. It's relative to peanut itself. It's Arachis pintoi instead of Arachis edulis, which is your edible peanut. I think you could eat the little peanuts on the bottom of them, but there's not many there. Now we're getting a bit woody. This is getting a fraction woody. But this is definitely a better mulch what I'm putting down than say a straw mulch or something like that. You see how it's spread there a little bit. I probably want to go a little bit higher, so I'm going to do that. And then I want to go up, up, up. Take those off, we get less resprouts. We take them in close, probably a little bit more on the back there. So again, it will just come off there. Look at all the mulch I've got here. You really haven't, sometimes you haven't got time to do all this, cut it so much, but this is what we do every morning. I do a couple of hours of this before breakfast, between 6 and 8. We have, some people do 2 hours in the kitchen garden, which is our finer garden. Some people do 2 hours in our main crop, and some people do 2 hours in the food forest. And that's my favourite gig, is in the food forest. Kitchen garden is like Sesame Street. I mean, it's just permaculture 101 nowadays. And now we've got our main crop going so well, it's almost the same. It's like kindergarten. But food forests are quite long-term things, so we've got another pigeon pea here.
There's a popcorn in the back corner over there behind it.
There's a popcorn here.
No, straight, more,
Oh, yeah.
more in front of you, Jeff. In the back corner over there.
Over there. And what's this? This is an elata, is it?
Yeah. No,
Right, so this one and that one look very similar. They're both cassias. But this one's a little bit bigger in the leaf, and it's almost identical flower. Candlestick cassia is its common name as well. But that one has a black tip on the flower. So what I do is I go through here. I was trying to sort of get a sequence where I was going to put the legumes down first, and there's a few here to put down. I'll just speed it up a fraction. I could just bash it with a machete now if I wanted, just knock straight onto it. It really wouldn't look safe with my thongs on. And then I was going to cover it up with a non-legume mulch, as if I was going to be really pedantic about what we're doing here. I'd put the nitrogen down first and the non-nitrogen layer on top, which ideally, I mean, you get the idea, that the non-nitrogen cover would ideally be this. That's just a perfect abundant one. You can just go over the top and cover up the nitrogen, so you're actually getting it closer to the soil with a cover on top of it. And this will grow back like crazy. All of these things I'm cutting will grow back quick as, you know, turn around, it'll be back. And of course you can eat arrowroot if you want, and it's great forage for animals. So this avocado is getting totally spoiled.
Go on.
You know that. Yeah, this one in your short-term legumes, oh, you can see, there we go. There's a classic pollard. Look. That's pollarded. And like, if you wanted to be brutal, you could probably just break that off. It'd break off at the heel. But if you, and there's the big resprout. For me, that's a fraction low. I probably just, I like it about my shoulder. I don't want it so low that when it resprouts, I'm bumping into it. I don't want it so high that I need a ladder to get up there because someone's going to get a tripped ankle. When it gets a bit bigger, when we get into the bigger ones like the ice cream bean, you've got to use a little pruning saw. Where's our nearest fruit tree? Here still. So I'm just looking. There's my target. Here's my product. I'm just taking it from one way to another. Yeah, I haven't got any to prune, but if I was going to do that one, I'd use. Have you used Silkies?
No.
You've seen them? The Japanese
Out
saw?
of my price
At your price range. Yeah, they're gorgeous. There's a new saw called, they're a Japanese brand called Silky pruning saws. Oh, they're amazing. Almost as quick as a chainsaw. But those saws need looking after. You can't let anyone else use it. I don't let anybody use mine.
My first avocado stayed alive, so I planted them all.
That one? Oh yeah. So avocados are not going to like this soil because you need 4 foot of well-drained topsoil for a good avocado. Otherwise their roots get down into the waterlogged zone and they get phytophthora in the roots. It just naturally happens. So if you find a system that grows avocados well, you want to stick to it. Of course, when you get the roots of that ice cream bean down below it, it might be getting to the stage where it's well drained. The other way I've played around with is making what we call avocanos. This is a trichinae, and it's making like a big mound of, piling up a big pile of soil, planting avocado on the top, and then we covered the whole mound with rocks, like a big rock boulder mulch all the way around it, and planted ground cover in amongst it. But the rock gets quite warm in the sun and then dries the mound out a certain amount, helping the drainage, and we're getting a reasonable result with it. But that's why you always see the avocados more on the red soils, because they're so well drained. Okay, so drop it all like that. Doesn't take long. Considering a bale of hay is $8, $9. Just the poorest quality hay is that. That's it here, isn't it? 8, 9?
Some mulch hay there.
Six. Better than we can do in northern New South. You're right there, don't worry.
Yes, you're looking about 12 out that way.
12? That's where is Lockyer Valley?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're more desperate for feed out there, that's what it is. Not going to hit that in case it bounces back on anyone. But you could go through a machete prune like this.
Which I did all of that.
Yeah.
In the machete. And then I come into my legumes with that.
Of course, if you're more gardening, you've got a smaller system, you don't have to go to machete, you can just do it with a prune. And loppers, there's some beautiful loppers today. You've got to watch the young men with loppers, because they'll cut more bigger branches than they want to, or they should do, and they'll twist the anvil here. So you really got to watch the young guys. Long handle tools, worst of all axes, young men and pretty girls. Doesn't work. Right, they take their eye off the target, they hit the handle, bang, you've lost the axe every time. I'd be cutting that about here. We cut that whole thing off to just a straight, and there's a lot of mulch up there. And then I'd cut all these branches. Can I do it?
Yeah.
Yeah, cut it down.
You have to use the saw, I'm not sure.
Yeah. I do want it to regrow. So this I cut all of that to the avocado, and then this I'll just do a little back cut on it. Hopefully to stop it splitting as it comes down. Nothing over there, it'll fall on you. There's quite a lot of mass there, and what I do is cut all this stuff. You could pick it off like that if you had the time. All that is going to mulch, and that green tip, like that green end, that's classic of a legume. It's almost herbaceous on the end. That's all going as mulch. Probably right down to there is going as mulch. But then when I get to that there, that can go as mulch. But then we start getting down to the wood. As we get to the branches and the wood, little logs, what I've started to do now is lay them down on contour next to the footpath. As my footpaths are on contour. They're only like this wide. I could almost run down them with a mower, but I can go down with a whippersnipper. I've never done this before. I never needed to. Because for me, it was always easy just to walk in there. I'm not worried about it. But for my students, for everyone who wants to learn, they just weren't going in. It took me a long time to get it. It's really changed, hasn't it, Maria? The food forest now. So we put the footpath through, and there's a clean line you can walk through, and you can see to the next food forest. You see to the next footpath. So on the shallower ridge, that might be 2 to 3 meters, maybe 4 meters. As it comes to the valley, they almost touch. They're like 1 meter apart, half a meter apart, but that tends to be the wetter spot. That tends to be the spot where you've got more understory like taro, cocoa yam. Your cassavas and your drier species are out on the ridge. It defines the area a little bit. Now they say for a footpath or any access track, it's more stable on contour or down a ridge line, the middle of a ridge. So water goes either side of your footpath. So it naturally occurs that your ridge line can have a track down it where in the food forest, your ridge line with your footpaths further apart has a track going at right angle to contour. But then when your footpaths come closer together in the valley, it's more likely you're going to put a bit of hardware in there, like a little pond or a little set of stone steps. So you're going to walk from the valley. In the valley, you can cross contour. You can go up and down. On the ridge, you can change contour. And it just makes it, all of a sudden, you can see a lot more of, it takes the complication out of the food forest. It makes it more understandable for people. They look at a section, footpath by footpath, and go, we could put a few more things in here, or we need a bit more understory here. So as we're converting to, see this, that's the frame that comes out. Now that's no good to put on the ground. Right? It's not going to touch the ground well enough. So what I do is I dissect that up. I could do it with those machetes actually because it would be quick. Right? Can I cut with a machete on this?
Yeah.
Now, I dissect this up. Like, oh, no. Like that size log. I take that out, that out, that out, that out, that out, all the way down. And each one of these, and then even get a bundle of them like that and put them on the edge of the footpath, top and bottom. Now they're right on contour. And you could actually go, if you wanted to, you could go that long. It won't, it's not too bad if you go that long. But that would be better. That would be better. That would be, and now you're really feeding the soil fast. All on contour, they're right where you want, you know where they are, they're right next to the track. And we've even started putting lemongrass along the edge of the track, because we've got so much, that's all, like Tom's got vetiver. And we put strawberry in between, because we've actually got so many strawberries in our kitchen garden, it's kind of bizarre. It's really good for kids. You walk down the track and it's just, you can't eat the strawberries from one end to the other. But by doing this, it's made it sort of more understandable what it is we're doing in the food forest. So that's by intention we're creating this wood to rot. Right? That's a very important part of growing a food forest, of facilitating that food forest. Now, when you're coming up, your trees are little, your nitrogen fixing trees are little, but they're going to grow faster than the fruit trees to start with. That's why you're able to do that to them.
So it doesn't matter how much you put down the base here around the trees?
Once it gets over 2 meters thick, pull up a bit, you're getting a bit much, right? Everything's got an edge.
Oh yeah.
You know, like compost?
Yeah.
You put compost on the ground,
Yeah.
right? It's fine, obviously. Like, you can garden in compost. You start putting compost around a tree. You know why they never make compost more than 1.5 meters high in the biological farming? The weight of the compost itself starts to make the lower layer anaerobic, and you want aerobic compost. So if you start putting compost in the ground more than 1.5 meters thick, pull up, because
yeah.
you've got. I know it
Yeah,
sounds
I
ridiculous,
I'm
but
like-
we've got to be ridiculous.
Well, I'm just looking at that going, okay, that seems a lot, you know.
Oh no, that's not a lot.
No, okay.
No, I could go up here.
Yeah.
Got the
I don't want to put it on the trunk of the tree.
No.
I always want to pull back from the trunk of the tree. I'll show you
So
something.
you just do a shape around it, like with the in the
no,
middle.
just pull back. It's going to be quite rough. I'm going to emphasise. I want to put them on next to the track. I want to.
Got to make a line.
And along the track, they're actually going to be piled up like that because you're going to. I tell you, you're going to have so many bloody logs. Ideally, everyone's touching the ground, like all the way along. But all you have to do is keep your eye on the soil, and then you've got to know what it is you're looking for, right? Underneath, you try this. Underneath ground covers anywhere. Anyone know Singapore daisy? Yeah, I love it. Absolutely love it. Such a hard-working immigrant. South American, Central American. Any ground cover, any perennial ground cover, pull it back, have a look at the soil creation going on underneath, and look for little crumbs of soil. And them little baubles. You know, a farmer picks up soil and he crushes it into a ball, just naturally does it, crushes it into a ball and then rubs it apart. What he's done is taken the crumb soil and squeezed it so the air particles between the crumbs have been crushed in his fingers. Because only just done that, he can rub it apart again. The biodynamic people go on and on and on and on and on about the aesthetics of soil because you can't measure aesthetics. Aesthetics is not measurable. It's like, it's beautiful, it's aesthetic, right? They go on about aesthetics soil having to be crumb structure. Now, why is that? Because the crumb structure is created by the gel, right, that's exuded from the bacteria that they've taken from the rhizosphere of the roots. So on the actual root, the hair roots of the plant, not the taproot, the millions of hair roots, there is a sticky gel that is the starch created by photosynthesis. The bacteria take that starch and they stick together a colony of soil crumb, and it stops the bacteria washing away. Because you need a 600 times microscope. You have to magnify them 600 times to clearly see the bacteria, and even then they're only jiggly little dots in the microscope. Now, they're very susceptible to being washed through. Now, when they make crumb structure, the crumb structure stops that happening. Right? And when I say hair roots, not a little bit of hair root. Only the biodynamic people have done like really weird experiments. They measured the hair root length of plants to see how much hair root we're talking about. And surface area is always very, very hard to imagine. Who could imagine that a tablespoon of dissolved charcoal, has a surface area of 10 acres? Fact. How can you get 10 acres in a tablespoon? It doesn't seem possible. But have a look at dissolved charcoal under a microscope and you'll soon see why. It's got this craziest shapes. The surface area is really easy to misjudge. Right? So, you know, if you measured the surface area of your hair, you find it would be enormous. Right? Well, the surface area of hair root is like your hair. So biodynamic people test this stuff a lot, and they measured ryegrass. Ryegrass is not a big thing. It's not a tree. Right? It's a herbaceous grass. Average hair root accumulated length, if you add up the length accumulated, is 129 kilometers per ryegrass. So when you're talking about something that's so small, you need 600 times magnification to see it, and it's interacting with 129 kilometers of surface area on a ryegrass. When we turn around and look at the food forest, there's a gazillion kilometers of surface area we're talking about interacting with beneficial organisms that we know nothing about. So like science has really lost the plot here when it comes to creation. I mean, there's so many things you can quote like this to verify what we're talking about. 2,020 new trees and plants are discovered every single year, every year. We haven't named yet. Last year, a very large legume tree was discovered in the Congo, never been named before, never been discovered, named. 2020 is the average of new plants discovered every single year. We really don't know much about the living world at all, really. You know, a little bit, but not much when it comes to the connections. If you look closely in here, and I don't know what's going to be under here, so I'm just flying blind here, but I can see it straight away because I knew we're feeding the soil. There's a little shell, a little bit of calcium going down there. But if you scrape the surface, I'll just get some up for you. You can do it anywhere on the property. Crumb structure. It's all crumb structure. There's only one thing that sticks crumbs together like that: beneficial bacteria. Have a look under Singapore daisy. Have a look over a ground cover of sweet potato. Any of those things. And then you could interact with animals. Then you can interact with. Now, if we're going to put a mobile animal in here, we better time it correctly. Right? So, you know, you couldn't put cows in here without it being a bit of a problem, right? But if it was big enough, we could interact with cows, but that timing have to be very careful. We might be able to very quickly put a large animal like pigs through, even in a system like this, but we'd have to be really careful. We have to be really careful. We could put Muscovy ducks through here, which are actually geese, and they'd strip this whole thing down to, it'd almost no herbaceous plant to be in here in 3 weeks' time. If you had enough geese, of course, it's the area to the number of geese to the time now. You've got a different equation now. You're not time stacking something that's moving slowly now, season by season. You're time stacking something that moves 24/7, or well, all daylight hours. And it depends how many you stack in. You can dump them in, you can dump them in, you can dump them in. Depends on the concentration on the ground, the area they're on, and the time they're in. Geese, like I say, so they eat grass, and they've got big claws, and they'll more or less strip that paddock down. You know, you put a quarter of an acre with 100 Muscovy geese in there in 3 weeks' time, it'll more or less be bare soil. Not quite. There'll be 1 or 2 big clumping grasses left that you'll very easily be able to identify and turn them upside down with a mattock. And there'll be just nothing but a sheet of duck shit on the ground. It'll be just sheeted. It won't be like chicken shit or any other shit. Ducks and geese just plaster. It's just like a plaster across the ground. Now, you have to be careful how you cycle the mobile element. I mean, we've done a lot of chickens. We'll cycle cows, beef cows over the ground to get ready. Then we'll move in with chickens. Then we can, at different cycles, we'll lose control of the food forest, but not completely. But we'll put an animal cycle in and recover it, and then introduce extra plants. Then buffer the system. We'll reinsure the system. But we've had Muscovy geese on the ground. We've had a mass explosion at the moment. We're getting like 100 to 200 babies at once, a month. So we're eating a lot of duck at the moment. We've got a lot of duck in the freezer. Yeah. It's like they're going in the freezer pretty fast.
So where are you?
Sorry?
Where are you?
Northern New South Wales. But the other week, what did we do? We did, what was the first one I killed? We did 10 chickens, 10 big chickens on a Monday, 18 ducks on a Tuesday, 12 Muscovies on a Wednesday, and 5 big turkeys on a Thursday, and we had Friday off. We were going to do rabbits, but we gave it away. We had a slaughtering week for the interns. They had to come and intern at our place. You better not be a vegetarian. Well, if you are, you better give you something else to do for that period. You know? We're very sensitive. But we had Muscovy geese eat whole bananas, trees, down to 6 inches underground. There was a hole when you look down, you could see the banana trunk 6 inches underground. That's how heavy we had them on the ground. We moved them on, and believe it or not, most of those bananas reshot from 6 inches underground. Quite unusual. But all I'm trying to say is there are cycles that you can interact with animals in these systems to pre-curse the system and to maintain the system, to do dynamic work events. But you have to be very careful as to the density of animals over the area to time. And it's all totally possible. But now you have to be the very careful observer, because it's a different cycle. Plants don't move as quick as we do, or animals. Animals move pretty fast, and they're very, very, very constant. So your chicken fertility systems, your chicken composting systems, all those systems we develop, they're extremely dynamic, but they're non-stop. They never stop. There's no, I take a day off from the animals. That doesn't happen. You can take a day off from this without the animals, but the animals you can't take a day off. You got to be feeding them. You got to be watering them. You got to make sure they're okay. Plus, you got to watch they're not going too far, too quick. Right, I'm getting this sign. Right, we ready to go?
Yep, cup of tea time.
Tea break. Right.
Jeff will be doing Q&A during and or once you've got a cup of tea or whatever, and for the next hour.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you.
I didn't go on. We've got a question over here from someone very local.
About a quarter of a hectare of this cane grass going on a quarter of a hectare of steeper terrain is just all lantana basically, and some wild tobacco. It's going to attack it with the brush hook, but do you have a better plan for utilising it?
And like all lantanas, how much is it all? How many acres of lantana?
Quarter of a hectare of lantana.
We get a catch.
So this is really local, it's just here.
Yeah.
And you said the key thing, you said that there's wild tobacco coming up, right? Only rainforest pigeons eat wild tobacco berries. When you see wild tobacco, it's going towards forest. So there's a very interesting story from New Zealand about this, where they have gorse, which is their lantana, if you like. Gorse is a large part of the hard-working immigrants of New Zealand, and non-New Zealand farmers spent many generations trying to hold gorse back, which is a legume and a spiky legume, and it used to be fed to cattle in Europe when they put it through a mangle to crush the spikes, but it's the enemy of the farmers in New Zealand. And almost 20 years ago, a lot of land was given back to the Maori people of New Zealand, which was old farmland. And what they did was they did nothing, which is a good thing to do quite often when you've got over-cleared land. And the whole landscape, which had been cleared in the grazing land, often too steep, volcanic slopes are very, very steep at times, all turned into gorse. And the old heritage farmers were very upset about that, because the amount of work generations and generations of clearing, and the Maori people said, well, we do what we want, and what we want to do is leave it alone. Leave us alone. We've got own the land now. We've got our land back. Then over about 8 or 9 years, 10 years, wild tobacco started to come back in. Wild tobacco came into the gorse, and you got patches of wild tobacco. And the only birds that eat wild tobacco are forest pigeons. And forest pigeons came in to eat the wild tobacco and dropped forest seed. And the wild tobacco patches became patches of native New Zealand forest. And the wild tobacco only grew on the outside. And then patch by patch, over about 20 years, it started to close up. And the gorse got grown out by wild tobacco. The wild tobacco got grown out by native forest, with the pigeon as the instigator. And right then, a very big global event happened called 9/11. And a lot of Americans who were wealthy enough to buy large parts of other countries decided the safest place to go in the potential events of the present time was New Zealand, right? You know, they filmed, you know, Lord of the Rings and everything else got to be safe. And it's like, when you're in New Zealand, you feel like you've left the rest of the world behind anyway, you know, it's a long way away. And they didn't want a farm, they didn't want open land, they didn't want to do that. And one thing that fetched the best money was native New Zealand forest. They were willing to pay more money for native New Zealand forest than anything else. So the local people could turn around to the farmer and say, well, if you'd done nothing for 20 years, you'd have had more expensive land now to sell. You know, so you've got to look at reactions. And what happens here is wild tobacco comes into Lantana as a fast track to rainforest. Right? But the Acacia melanoxylon comes in, the local acacia, what you call blackwater, well, there's lots of blackwater. It comes into Lantana where it's going to go to eucalypt forest. So if you pay attention to the succession, now I'm not saying you have to do nothing, but if you want to play to the rules of the game, it's very important to think, well, what would I put in to fast track the succession out of Lantana? So if you cut the Lantana, what you're going to end up with is another weed that's probably more of a problem than Lantana. Lantana's a little bit spiky. Lantana is a very rich leaf fall. The shallow soil underneath Lantana is very high quality, but if you clean it with a machine, it usually damages that soil. You get a lot of native birds in Lantana, the little birds that drop a lot of little phosphate manures. You can actually plant into the Lantana. You can use the Lantana as the mulch. That's very unconventional. You can do it with blackberries as well, and you can do it with gorse in New Zealand. All of those like head-high type scrambling weeds, you can do what the marijuana growers do it. The marijuana growers grow in the Lantana. They fertilise patches of Lantana and grow marijuana very well. And so if you actually cut little corridors into it, now just to juxtapose that, I'm very interested in those things. It's extremely unconventional, but Nadia and I were in England 2 years ago, and we're in Leeds visiting the Permaculture Association. We're doing a bit of filming, and someone said, "Are you going to go to Pam's Food Forest?" I went, "Who the hell's Pam? I didn't know who Pam was." And then we got introduced to this lady who'd done this really unconventional thing. Rachel. Pam was the other one. The Brains Trust. Now, Rachel's Food Forest at I think it's Sellingford Manor. This lady lived in a manor house, in the outbuildings of a manor house. It was just gorgeous, large manor, all conventional farm today. They had like a wind in the willows type mill pond and a beautiful walled garden, 18th century walled garden, and an old gardener had worked in the garden since he was 14. He was 84. Wow. He worked in the garden 70 years. He'd just gone back to a 38-hour week. He'd cut his hours down, which was an unusual thing. It came up, right? And this lady, Rachel, had rented 2 acres off the Lord of the Manor. He was a lovely guy. He had lots of nice little industries going on in the outbuildings. And Rachel decided she's going to put a food forest in. And I've got a very good, what's the video called, Nadia?
Actually, this is actually a new Jeff Lawton online group.
Jeff Lawton online website's got this video in. Permaculture Circle. Anyway, she did 1/4 acre at a time of food forest, cold climate, Yorkshire, and she never got the 2 acres done. Because when she got 1 acre done, she had so much production, she didn't know what to do with it. and she actually had to start a preserves business, and she makes cordials, jams, and pickles and preserves. And she rented another building in the manor house and got all stainless steel kit, and actually got, you know, health department approval to have a preserves production business. But she doesn't weed. She doesn't do anything. She picks. And the only time she cuts the weeds, and we got nettles, thistles, blackberries, it's a mess. And when you first pull up at Rachel's Food Price, you just think someone's deserted it. And then you look closely, there is a deer fence around it, so deer can't get in. There's these really small corridors, it's like a labyrinth, like a maze. And she's cut a way in, and that's all she cuts, where you can walk. And there's apples and pears and cherries and hazelnuts. It's full of food. It's full of fruit. It's full of berries. She's got all kinds of exotic berries, everything in there, but you just can't see it. It's totally unconventional what she's doing. And the only time she cuts or does it is when she has to get to a tree to pick it. And then she cuts it, leaves it right where it is. And she almost ridicules permaculture as being too complicated. She doesn't put swales in. You should see this video because Nadia films it. We walk right through it. It's one of the most radical food forest, unconventional things I've ever seen in my life. I always knew it was possible, but I've never seen someone do it so full on. So if you wanted to food forest that system, it sounds like it might be too steep. You could literally cut into it and plant into it and use the lantana as the mulch and diversify the lantana as you go. But it sounds like it's steep and it's something you want to reforest. So you can literally go in there and plant, you know, pioneer forest trees like acacias and then plant silky oaks, blue quandongs, crow's ash, probably hoot pine, bunya pine, carry pine, in amongst the pioneer acacias, into the lantana and just let it rip out and shade it away. I would not clear the whole thing and then try doing that same thing in bare soil, because the lantana does a great job of holding it all together. Thank goodness for lantana. It's number 5 on the noxious weed list of the world, and it's holding a lot of the subtropics together. Like gorse is holding a lot of the humid Mediterranean together and warm temperate. And number 1 weed in the world is an Australian. The top of the hit parade of weeds in the world is a Sunshine Coast local. East Coast local. No. Cat's Claw's Australian?
No. Cat's Claw's South American.
South African, isn't it?
Yeah, South American.
South American?
Yeah. What's our East Coast beauty?
The number 1 weed in the world, Melaleuca quinquenervia, the paperbark of our coast. The number 1 weed in the whole world. Germinates by fire as well. Grows in wetlands. Nearly taken every single subtropical wetland in the world, including the Florida Everglades completely. That's cool. Nothing wrong with an Aussie working over there. It fits. If it fits, it works. You know, the swamps are drained in Florida by the original settlers, and then it became an ideal storm for that one plant that actually grows in swamps that burn. Now you'll see here that you won't get paperbark coming up unless there's a fire, and then you get a complete recruitment after a fire. It's fire dependent. So where we drain swamps and make them easily burn in this climate, you'll get a perfect situation for our paperbark. And generally people have, instead of working with swamps, they've drained swamps to try and turn them into non-swamps. Where swamps are some of the most productive ecosystems you can work with. but working with a swamp is completely unconventional to the westernized European-based heritage farmer. But you put duct systems into swamps. If you dig out a swamp a little bit, what you dig out immediately becomes a pond. So intensify the water. When you put that material on the ground, you intensify the land. That almost starts to be a chinampa, where you got higher land and lower, deeper water. But if you do that a little bit and put yourself duck ponds spaced out through swamps, the ducks will self-forage the swamp and come back to be productive in your pond. Almost nothing else left to do except harvest your ducks. There are all kinds of things you can do with ecosystems that are naturally productive if you don't think in a conventional way. And the same with succession. If you look at your lantana, you look at your acacia regen. If you look at the way the eucalypts regenerate here, there's some very interesting processes, including lantana. So after the herbaceous weeds comes lantana. Then if you wait, what happens is the acacia comes under the lantana and lifts the lantana. The lantana does not climb the acacia. The acacia lifts the lantana and tents it. Our acacia here only lives for about 18 to 20 years. And at the end of its life, when it starts falling, spasmodically falling, it has secondary tenting effect where it's sort of going over the trunks, the fallen trunks. At that point in time, the scrub woods germinate. Now the old fellas call them the scrub woods. They're the trees that were the understory that were never big enough to mill. They're the, what are they? They're the brown brolly wood, the pink ash, the red ash, the pencil cedar. They're all the understory of the forest that were never big enough to be millable timber. So they were generally called scrub wood. They germinate as the acacia comes down, and they're just coming up with the final acacias that are dying. As they die, the final acacias create the germination of the eucalypt. The eucalypt goes above the scrub wood. You're back in a eucalypt forest. If it's not naturally a eucalypt forest, if that eucalypt forest has come up in a wet gully, something really weird happens. It's in about 100 to 120 year cycle. A Victorian immigrant comes in called a bellbird. Native to Victoria, it comes into the New South Wales and Queensland and starts to make that lovely bell sound. But it excludes all other native birds while it farms a eucalypt that kills, that farms a lerp that kills the eucalypt. And the conservationists in northern New South Wales, when they saw that happening, thought they needed to poison the bellbird. But they didn't do it. They didn't poison the bellbird because just in time we realised that as the bellbird's killing the eucalypt, they were only doing it in the wet gullies. I don't know why that works. And rainforest comes up and replaces the eucalypt. Now no one lives long enough to see that cycle. No one sees the whole cycle from the clearing to the bellbird, but we've observed it in northern New South Wales on the border ranges and on the edge of the border ranges. So you don't design those cycles, you can only observe them, but you can imitate them by design, and that's the only way you get a free lunch. And there's no free lunches out there without good design, none at all, none, not one. You don't luck into a free lunch. There's no going out there and grazing that forest anymore, because you're going to starve, you're not going to make it. You're going to go, well, unless you go into a hunter and gatherer maybe, but you're going to be pretty hungry and pretty fit. But you can design it. It's a great question, because many people are kind of like prejudiced about this and don't know, oh, and we've spent all our time trying to kill this and kill that. Sure, I know, I can appreciate the hard work. Hard work's pain associated memory, it locks in really hard. But got to look at the end result. And the natural system doesn't stick to the rules. You know, the bellbird didn't have to have a passport to arrive in northern New South Wales. Tim Lowe wrote a book called New Nature, Australian author, really worth reading. It's called New Nature, and it's about the nature of Australia and what happened to our native species when Australians arrived. Kind of interesting what happened. Very interesting. And another one, if you want to do a global version of that, just recently, 2006, Chris D. Thomas wrote a book called Inheritors of Earth. I wish Bill had lived long enough to read it. Bill would have laughed and cackled his way through the whole thing. When I was reading it, I could hear Bill laughing.
There's another book by Fred Pearce. Have you read Fred Pearce's book, The New Wild? He's been an environmental writer for the last 30 years, and that is brilliant, talking about how important it is for these invasive species to
New Wild?
It's called The New Wild.
Not Fred Pearce who wrote When the Rivers Run Dry,
Probably, yeah, yep.
is it?
Yeah, so he wrote it, it was only released last
Is it the
year.
same guy?
Yes, yes,
Because When the Rivers Run Dry is a page turner.
yeah.
I mean, I couldn't put it down.
Well, The New Wild is brilliant, you know, and the research that he's got into, and some of the examples is fantastic.
Fred Pearce one.
Yeah. But yeah.
He's a great
excellent.
writer if it's
Yeah.
the same guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he wrote about when the rivers, all the water systems of the world. Amazing. Amazing. It's a must read, that one, so it's probably the same.
Yeah.
There's a lot of new ecology writing. And last week, we're losing our prejudice of ecology. It's sort of, it's you know, it's illegal. And it's not considered the right thing and everything to be prejudiced about people. And we need to get that way about all living things if we're going to save the earth. We can't be prejudiced about things. If it's alive, we can't be prejudiced. We can't be prejudiced about non-living things either, really. First ethic of permaculture, earth care, is respect of the earth's living and non-living systems. You know, you can't quarry whole mountains down. You know, you can't. You know, even non-living things, you've got to have some respect. But of course, living things, they're, you know, all living things are speciated for some reason, for some effect. I mean, you don't have a headache because you've got a deficiency of aspirin. But, you know, like you go to a doctor, you've got a headache, going to give you a Panadol. It's like, that's not the problem. You've got a headache for another reason. You don't have weeds because you've got a deficiency of glyphosate in the landscape. You don't. That's not, that isn't what's needed. You know, it's a little bit more subtle than that. You've got to think it out. Yeah, so, you know, like a good ecological manager, you know, is unemployed until you've got weeds, and then you need ecological management. It's like, you know, your Chinese doctor, you pay him to stay well. You stop paying him when you get ill. You know, it's the same thing across the landscape. I mean, I got no problem with any domestic animals at all. I've even tried to prove you can reforest with goats, and that's an oxymoron for most people. How can you reforest with goats? We actually proved you can. It takes management, sure, of course it takes management. Goats have got a serious reputation. All right, that was too long an answer. Next.
Another local context question, Jeff. I was wondering if you could chat a little bit about the opportunities and challenges of trying to establish systems on a dam wall, whether food systems or forest systems or pasture, but what you've seen you can work with. Obviously, there's limitations.
Yeah, a dam wall is an earth structure, and it's when we go in to do design work, we go in water first, water access structures. So it's an earth structure that holds back water, and because of that, it's got you created a geological integrity, and you have to maintain that integrity. So you can't have taproot trees on a dam wall, or even reasonably close to it. So that's a limitation straight away, unless they're very small trees, which are really shrubs. And it's really something that you shouldn't try and grow food on the wall, like on the back of the wall particularly. Now, that's not to say you couldn't grow a non-taproot tree, because you can never say never in all of these things. So, bamboo is a grass, and there is obviously half the bamboos in the world are clumpers, and they're not runners, so they're not a problem. They're timber and food, or hedge. All bamboo can be eaten as shoots, all of it. Some of it's so small it's not worth eating, and some are very bitter, and they're not in that non-Asian diet, but they're in the Asian diet as a bitter. But a lot of them are structure, and they're all forage. I mean, it's chocolate to a cow, because it's giant grass. And there are no bamboos that grow more than 1/2 metre deep, but they have incredible hair root, so they're amazing at holding structural integrity together. So, and because of the leaf fall, you get no weeds, so it's hard to mow the back of a dam wall. It's often too steep and dangerous to mow and everything. Then your choices start to get limited, which makes design easy, right? When you put restrictions on a designer, design gets easy, because most of the time we're spoilt for too many choices. Willows don't have a taproot. They're one of the woody trees that don't have taproots. They have a reputation for long spreading roots. So they also hold a dam wall together. And they've got a bad rap in Australia, but they're actually a reaction to holding landscape together. People don't want to hear that. People don't want to hear those things anyway. When you take down high willow swamps, you erode whole landscapes from the top down in Australia. David Holmgren, and you can't have anyone more conservative than David, or precisely accurate and academic than David, right? That's his claim, right? And he'll say that he's in favour of willows. I like to be able to quote David sometimes. So willows, and there are some great willows. There are some really good willows to make money out of. There are willows for weaving. There are willows for forage. There are willows for tanning. There are willows for growth hormone creation. The aspirin comes from willow, bark of willow, and charcoal willow, which is charcoal pencil willow, is really expensive. Go and buy an artist's charcoal pencil in the art shop. See how much you pay for it. It's just a piece of charcoal willow, not hard to grow willow. Easy to cop as a willow. So willows are interesting, and then you've got palms, which don't have taproots. So I'm able to say there is one palm that has an edible fruit here that you don't have to kill to eat it, because you can eat harder palm anywhere, but you kill most of them if they're not clumping palms. But you have the jelly palm, which does fruit here. It's the only fruit in palm, goes right to the Mediterranean. There's some in Melbourne Botanical Garden. They've got quite a good one there. It's Bootea capitata. You'll see it in people's gardens, and they don't know you can eat it. It looks a fruit like cocos palm.
Yeah. Oh,
It's yellow, but it tastes like a loquat or an apricot.
Spiky France.
Spiky?
Yeah, on the France.
I don't think they're spiky. They're bluey green.
No, yeah, blue and green.
Bluey green colour. It's quite a nice looking palm.
Triangle sort.
The frond is kind of palm, like one-sided. It's kind of triangular.
Yeah.
There. It grows well in this climate. So there is a fruit you can grow as a palm on the wall. Nothing really beats bamboo for taking all the maintenance out. So I use the back of a lot of my dam walls as arboretums of bamboo collections. I don't really want to be digging the shoots out that much. I just want my collections there, so I know where my bamboo diversity collectibles are, and then I extend out from there. I have extracted whole clumps off the back of dam walls, and I pulled them out with excavators. Other than that, very small shrubs. Vetiver grass is fine. Got plenty of examples of that here. Cuddy, if you want to go through it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think it's a woody taproot. And when they say that, where's Tom? You pulled any out?
What's that?
Yeah, vetiver. You pulled it out,
Long hairy roots.
Yeah, it's a hairy root. It's not
but it
that-
doesn't go down very far.
It does. Yeah,
How far?
3 or 4.
yeah it goes down meterage.
Meters?
Yeah, meters.
They say.
I've never dug that deep.
Yeah, they say in alluvial river flats it will go down like 11 meters and really straight, and they dig it out and then they flatten it and make Venetian blinds out of it.
Oh,
I've never done it, but I've not mucked about with it that much. And of course you can thatch with it, and there's a perfume you can make out of it apparently. None of it I've ever done.
Vetiver oil.
Sorry?
Vetiver oil.
It's an oil.
Yeah,
It's
I
a
think they
perfumed
crush it.
oil, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crush the weeds.
It's in 70% of the world's perfume.
Yeah. That, yeah, so you could use vetiver. You definitely would be. You could. It'd be definitely stronger than using lemongrass, which wouldn't be enough in the end. And citronella grass is halfway to vetiver. Pampas grass, which people are worried about. No, but it's not good enough soil probably, because you're not going to have a lot of earth cover on the wall. Now, having said that, hold on a second. Sorry, these are typical answers to a permaculture question, because actually the answer to a permaculture question nearly always starts with "it depends." I'm halfway through now. It depends what kind of dam wall you got. Now, if it was a dam that you went into a gully and it was all slop in there, all mud and swampy, and you had to clear that out first, you might have to build a slop dam, or what we call a slop dam, which you don't compact, you just pile up, and you can only build them with excavators. Or you push the slop downhill away from the wall, below the wall where the wall's going to be. You get it into dry material, you build your wall out of your high clay content subsoil, and then at the end of the job, which is a day or two later, the slop is dried and you push it back onto the back of the wall. Now you've got a big pile of sloppy, high quality soil there. There you could do it on those dams, but not on the average dam. Not here. The average dam here has got this really, I know the Sunshine Coast dam walls, there not a lot of topsoil to go back on them quite often. And you know, therefore not the ideal but banana material. But bananas won't crack a dam wall, no. And if you've got enough topsoil, we'll be okay. If you happen to be bringing extra topsoil in, if you've got a thick enough dam wall, you can make pockets of topsoil, etc. They're not going to crack a wall. The biggest enemy is, we've been looking at, I looked at them at Aaron's place. He's got a classic example of, at Lulu's perch there in Pomona, he's got a classic example of Acacia melanoxylon on the back of a dam wall, has cracked it, and it's made it leak, and the clay looks like as tight as a bottle. I mean, it doesn't look like there's any problem with the clay at all. And it's a key point dam right at the top of the valley. There's no valley above it, there's only valley below it. That's a key point. That's the highest place you can put a dam in a valley. Every valley in this landscape has a key point. Its highest dam happens to be at the bottom of his property. It's not at the top, it's at the bottom. It's on top of the hill. And the Acacia melanoxylons are like this big in the trunk. There's 4 or 5 of them. One's already died, and they're making a dam leak. But the clay is so strong, you could probably cut the acacia, drop it all down as logs, get a machine in there, run half a metre or a metre deep, and pack it back down and probably seal without bentonite. I don't think it's the materials a problem. One time at the back of Karoi up near Black Mountain, up behind Black Mountain. I got called into a job there. Steve Peed's place. They used to be strong members of Permaculture Noosa. He had a little dam up in the valley, pretty exposed to the wind. Wattles have been allowed to grow on the back of the wall. They weren't very old. They're only like 4 or 5 meters high. They're full leaf. They'd had a misty day. A misty morning, that's when trees hold most weight, in the mist, not the rain. When it's fine mist and all the mist sitting on the trees heavy. And then they had a screwy wind, like a spirally wind, like summer semi-cyclonic wind. And the weight of the tree had done this and literally cracked the wall, literally physically cracked it, opened it, drained her out. Hadn't lost much wall though. Hadn't actually pulled much material. They were able to take the tree off, rebuild the dam. It was empty because it emptied itself.
If you've got a tree like that in there,
You are.
you're better off draining the dam and doing the job properly.
Yeah. Now, it depends. If you're talking about an acacia, like the oldest acacia I ever cut on the Sunshine Coast was a monster, like this, and Dendropanology counting the rings. I thought it was 27 years old, but that's pretty unheard of. Normally it's 18 to 20, and that's it. That's the oldest you'll get them. So when you're looking at them, you know, you want to age them and see it. They look much older than they are. They don't live long, and if they're acacias and you look at them, it's going to happen anyway. I better do it. If it's, what's this? A Flindersia here. This is a crow's ash. Looks like a crow's ash. Yeah. If it's a crow's ash, well, it's not going to die for about a few hundred years. It's not going to be your problem, is it? You can leave it for future generations. They might get a decent bit of timber out when they got to build the dam, but it didn't give me a problem for a while. It's not going to drink that much water. We got more water in the landscape than that. So when you get a tree that's long living and they're already in the wall, my thing is like, I just leave it. It's not a problem really. Oh no, get the wattles out. I know. My golden rule is, if it's too big for a machete, you got to get a chainsaw. You really got it down. Like you should get it down now. If you've got to get a chainsaw, you've already left it. You just want to get it down now. If you can get it off with a machete, it's all right. Just go and get them off. Keep them off. Go for a walk with a machete every now and again. Take them off. How big are the Flindersias? I'd be tempted to take them off. Yeah, if they're only that big, I could cut that down with a machete. You know, yeah, because how big's the damn wall? Can you drive over it?
Yeah.
It's over 3.5 meters wide. Driving over a damn wall 3.5 meters wide is like, oh, it's a bit tight. Usually it's 3.5 plus on the crest.
Yeah, not much. It's not that wide. It's probably just a road width wide.
Yeah, 3.5 is a minimum road. Yeah, you'd be right. Are they on the inside, the outside?
The wattles are coming up on the outside, just on the
Yeah.
side. But it's sort of a horseshoe like that. The spillway's this side, and
Yeah.
right on between the dam and the spillway. So they're in the seepage part of the wall.
In between the dam and the spillway.
So the dam's sort of like the water flowing that way up the valley. The dam sort of does this.
Yeah.
The spillway's over here.
Yeah.
It flows up, and they're in this patch.
Near the spillway.
Which is sort of drop down of the spillway, and it's quite steep on that side because it's like a heavy bits.
Are they on the built wall or are they on the bank behind?
They're on the built wall.
Yeah. If they're on the bank, they're all right. If they're off the built wall, they're okay.
Yeah, no, they're right in the built wall.
No, I'd take them out. I'd take them out before they get right across. The crowns aren't that big yet.
Yeah.
So the tap roots hasn't needed to go in there. It's not the tap root, it's the lateral that's going to go across. And it'll only give you a small problem if it is, and it won't be much of a problem. It'll be something fixable quite
But
easily.
The lateral roots haven't cut across and you take it out.
Yeah.
Tap root can rock down.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah, that won't matter. Yeah, the lateral is the one that will break the integrity, like a pipe going through a dam wall. That's why you put a baffle on the pipe, because the water will go down the outside of the pipe. Not the, you want it to go down the inside, but then the outside. Water's amazing at finding a difference of material, hard to soft. Any difference, it'll find it. But clumping bamboos are wonderful around dam walls, even on the inside. Small varieties of small clumping bamboos, like the miniatures, like multiplex, little varieties of multiplex, fernleaf multiplex, because you'll get a bamboo leaf fall on the shoreline. If you plant right on the shoreline, and it'll almost look like a beach, because the bamboo leaves look like sand on the beach and no weeds. It's almost like you're sitting on a beach, but you're sitting on a bamboo leaf carpet next to water, because the water makes everything fertile right next to the shoreline.
Just changing subjects completely. On one of your videos on composting, I noticed you've got a tractor with either a flail mower or something on the back of it, with a chute which picks up your grass for your bacterial compost. It goes into a trailer.
Yeah.
Did you have that flail mower modified, or was that the way you bought it?
Now that's a Dakin Lily. It's made by Dakin, who are like farm manufacturers, and it's a forage harvester. And there are still quite a few forage harvesters made. That's one of the cheaper ones, and it's pretty well recommended by some of the ag colleges. It's got a rubber-mounted flail hammer. I've worked it to death, just about. Best piece of farmmanship, best farm implement I've ever put behind a tractor, ever. It'll pick 5 cubic meters of finely chopped mulch up in 10 minutes on a good paddock with a good driver. Anybody can pick it up in 20 minutes. Anybody, 15 minutes average, 5 cubic meters of good quality mulch. Since we had that machine running, we've never ever been short of mulch. I wouldn't want to farm without it on acreage. And I think everybody used to have a forage harvester once. They were very common. And now, like modern machines like that, you know, that's quite a nice modern machine. They were the trailer and the mower, the mower and the trailer were $10,000 when I first started looking at them, and I dithered and dithered and dithered. By the time I bought one, they were 14. It was a few years later, and I wish I bought them when they were 10. It was worth every cent. We hammered it. We've rebuilt it and hammered it again. The trailer's falling to pieces. It's been bodged up and it's still picking up. I mean, we really smash equipment at the institute because we train people on it. Have you driven it? Forage harvester? You've driven the tractor though.
I was learning.
Learning. $40,000 worth of tractor and you let someone learn on it. But that's what we put our hand up to do. But yeah, no, amazing. I think we'll get great ones. I think we need smaller ones. They're an amazing machine. Amazing machine.
Another
Phenomenal.
question while we're on machinery. What's your opinion of the yeoman's plough system? Subsoiling.
Wonderful. Yeah, wonderful.
I thought it'd be
It's a chisel plough.
Yes.
So if you really don't want to pay the yeoman's price, Farm Tech in Victoria have a chisel plough that's pretty good and about half the price. Look, it's a chisel plough. I mean, let's not get too woo-woo about yeomans. He was cool, obviously. He wrote the famous book, Water for Every Farm. Mark Shepherd, who I mentioned earlier, I've just written a review on his book. Yeomans is Water for Every Farm.
Yes.
Mark Shepherd's writing a book quite cheekily called Water for Any Farm. I mean, yeomans is good. It's the Rolls Royce of chisel ploughs, no question about that. It's a beautiful piece of kit, but they're expensive. They're here in the Gold Coast.
Yes. Southport actually.
Yeah, and you've got the seed box, and you've got the compost dribbler on, and all kinds of stuff. But it's just a chisel plough. So if you're sensible with a Farm Tech chisel plough, and you're just choosing the right time to do it, that's the thing. yeah, you'll subsoil on contour, just off contour, and do wonders. Really, after a long time, they should be redundant on your farm. After a long time, you should only have to subsoil and chisel plough when you've over-compacted and made a mistake. Because if you've got enough trees in your grazing system on contour, if you start subsoiling around, I know, my timekeeper. I'm I'm outnumbered by women now. Two of them now on me. No, nothing did. Those, you've got to think about the fungal threads that are coming out of your tree lines through that pasture. And if you've made a mistake and you have to then yeoman's plough or chisel plough, let's say, on contour between your tree lines, you're ripping through all those fungal threads. I think, and they're not going to like me saying this, because I know there's yeoman devotees who are just like, you know, over the top with it. Look, all this stuff works, it's fine. Look at Farm Tech, and I'm not trying to push Farm Tech, but they're just one of them Aussie companies that make good implements. You know what a banana desuckering shovel looks like?
Just a long tapered.
Yeah, long tapered, thick metal shovel like that.
Yeah.
They've got a tool called an aerator.
Yes, I've seen that.
And it's like a drum, two drums actually, with these like spades on them, like that. And if you keep the drums parallel, all it does is put little half moon spikes in the ground. And if you pull the drums out of alignment, it rips a bit. I think the natural evolution is to go yeomans or chisel plough to get yourself back in good condition, get your tree lines up, then switch that off, sell it to somebody else who wants to do that, who wants to get their place in condition. We're sharing equipment now, and go with the aerator, because it will do the same thing on a system that's in good nick with good fungi underneath it, good tree lines. You don't have to do the long lines now, just do the spikies, and I reckon you'll be back. I've yet to trial it. I mean, you know, some of the young people are going to have to do this because we won't all be here long enough to do it all. But I think that's a way to think of it. Go for the half moon sort of aerator spiking after you've got it in condition. Your tree lines are up, your fungi's underneath. Don't go ripping through all your fungi after all those years of establishment. Just give it a good spike in and drop a bit of compost tea across it, and I reckon you'll be back in no time. Lunchtime.
No, we've got
Oh,
Amanda's doing chicken, so let's give Jeff a bit of fun with that.
Oh, he's coming at me! He's coming at me! Help! 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 Ah! Holy crap! He's still coming at me! Jimmy's a jerk! Well, there you have it, guys. Try get outside, join the Lulu's Perch Pioneer Guild on Patreon today, and I'll see you in the next chapter. Catch ya.